I always felt pretty powerless against climate change. Nothing I could do could make any difference. Until I thought I should ask the people who really can make a difference. And these are the CEOs of the oil majors. These guys, they're all guys, each of them has like 20, 30 billion per year to spend. And if they would spend these billions, not anymore to drill for more oil and gas, but to speed up the energy transition, we could stop climate change. Maybe you think this is impossible. We really think it's absolutely necessary to have any chance to stop climate change, to have any chance to meet the goal of the Paris Climate Agreement. So I started asking, close to home, I started asking Royal Dutch Shell. In 2015, when I told people what I was doing, the response I often got when I told them my mission, okay, so you actually want to change Shell. And then they gave me a very nice smile and said, okay, Mark, that's a noble cause, meaning dream on. We as ordinary citizens have no influence at all on an oil major like Shell. What I even hated more to hear was, yeah, follow this. A very sympathetic initiative. Let me tell you how, as ordinary citizens, we can indeed have influence on oil majors. And this all starts, I think all big changes start with somebody who thinks, wouldn't it be great if? Lucy Stone thought in around 1850, wouldn't it be great if women could vote? 100 years later, Rosa Parks thought, wouldn't it be great if I wouldn't have to give my seat to a white person anymore? Here at this stage, many people think, wouldn't it be great if my ideas would spread around the world? You also might once in a while think, wouldn't it be great? I thought, wouldn't it be great if Shell put their brains and billions behind renewable energy? And this started actually during my wake-up call in 2006, when I saw the movie An Inconvenient Truth of Al Gore. Up till then, I didn't worry about climate change, and I was a little bit ashamed. I was a mechanical engineer. What does a mechanical engineer do? He designs machines who put CO2 in the air. I didn't bother. But then as soon as I knew there was a problem and there was a solution to it, I thought, since then, basically every time I visit a newborn and I look at a kid of a couple of days old, I think this kid is going to see this whole century, and this kid is going to ask us in 10, 15 years from now, okay, so when I was born, you all knew there was a huge problem. What did you do about it? Or, as Greta Thunberg now always says, how dare you? My own son started when he was, I think, around 6. He was on front of my bike, and we were standing behind a diesel truck with a lot of pollution, and he said, Daddy, you're always telling me you do something about the environment. I don't notice it yet. So from then on, I started doing this first as a journalist. So as a journalist, I wrote down how logical it would be for a company like Shell to change course. And I sometimes end it with saying, Shell, if you don't change course, you will be the Kodak of the 21st century. You all know the story. Kodak invented digital technology, didn't have the guts to bring it to the market, and they went bankrupt in 2009, so 30 years after they invented it. So that's what I wrote down many times, but unfortunately, Shell didn't listen to me. So, but I thought, I saw my moment of glory already in front of me. In like 20 years from now, Shell would go bankrupt, and I could be on the 8 o'clock news telling how this all happened, and I could say, I told you so. Only my wife said, okay, 20 years from now, I'll make sure I have something else to do that evening, but because I'm not going to watch that. Men who say, I told you so, are not sexy. So I really had to think about something else. And then I thought, okay, Shell will not listen to a journalist, and not to an unknown journalist. Shell also doesn't listen to Greenpeace, governments. In most countries, the oil majors are more powerful than the governments. Who do they actually listen to? And my conclusion was that's the only entity they have to listen to is the shareholders. So I thought, okay, these shareholders, they are pension funds, institutional investors, they all talk about a green future, all talk about making sure people retire in a decent world. So I thought, okay, the shareholders have to support these companies and, if needed, force these companies to change. So first I called pension funds, explaining that they, as the owners of the oil majors, should ask them to change. And they said, okay, Mark, yeah, that's a very sympathetic initiative. But rest assured, we do engagement, we talk to them on a regular basis, and we move them in the right direction. I said, what do you discuss then? Yeah, that's confidential. So that didn't work. So I draw the conclusion that the only way to get something like this done is to start bottom up. So start as a grassroots organization. So in the beginning of 2015, we just started a website where you could buy one green share in Shell. And by that time, it was like over 30 euros. So when you owned one green share in Shell, you could send an email to the CEO of Shell and say, dear Ben van Beurden, I'm your newest shareholder. You can change the world. You have 25 billion to spend every year. So please have the guts to change course. You have my support. A few hundred people did that in 2015. So I could go to the shareholder meeting and speak there on behalf of a few hundred shareholders and ask Shell, what actually are you waiting for? And the answer I got was, yes, thank you for your question. Very sympathetic initiative. We invite you to come back every year, and then we will tell you when the time is right. The next year we could come back, but that year we could come back with a shareholder resolution. And that's because we had raised enough capital to put a resolution on the agenda. And the beauty of that's around 5 million you need for that. The beauty of a resolution is that everybody has to vote for it, all the shareholders. So then you really have the attention of all the big institutional investors, the pension funds, and also the board. So in 2016, for the first time, we put on the agenda of the shareholder meeting, shareholders support the company to set targets that are aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement. And these targets should cover all emissions. So this might sound very vague, but let me tell you a secret, it's a Trojan horse. Because as soon as you set targets that are aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement, the only conclusion you can draw as an oil major is that you have to stop investing and looking for more oil, stop investing for producing even more. No, you have to shift your investments to renewable, exactly what we want. But we formalized it in this way to get institutional investors on board. Of course, the Shell board immediately saw through this Trojan horse. It's a glass Trojan horse. So they advised their shareholders to vote against. And their argument was, we cannot take responsibilities for the emissions of our customers. So we will bring down our own emissions, but our customers have to bring down their emissions. So our product emissions, this is crucial to our ask. Our product emissions are beyond our control. And most shareholders, so they called our resolution and remember this word, unreasonable, because of product emissions. And most big institutional investors, including pension funds, they repeated this argument to us. So we went there, explained them that we had a very fair ask on the agenda, and I said, no, Mark, you're asking something unreasonable because one pension fund even had the guts to say, Shell doesn't know what their customers do with their products. That was the moment I lost my patience and said, I think they burn it. What do you think? But most pension funds follow the advice of the board. But luckily enough, around 3% in 2016 voted for our resolution. And a year later, 6%. And normally 99% votes with management. Normally the outcome is a North Korean outcome. So 6% is really big. It's 6 billion, but it's also big for a board, and they really have to do something with it. And Shell responded by the end of 2017 with a new ambition, a new climate ambition, and they promised to set an ambition for not only their own emissions, but also the emissions of their products. So that was really crossing the Rubicon for an oil company. And because, of course, the product emissions are the elephant in the room where nobody wanted to talk about. If you ask if an oil major says, yeah, we're going to bring down our own emissions, it's like a tobacco firm says, yeah, we're going to quit smoking, but we're going to still sell all these cigarettes. So Shell really crossed the Rubicon and set an ambition for all their emission. That's really thanks to the support of these shareholders. And a year later, we could repeat that basically with Total, BP, and Equinor, Norwegian oil major. And there exactly the same happens. First, I said the resolution is unreasonable. Then a small minority of shareholders started voting for the resolution, and then half a year later, they all came with an ambition for all their emissions. So not only their own emissions, but also the product emissions. So 4 oil majors already responded to our shareholder resolution. And the response of Ben van Beurden, the CEO of Shell, was an understatement. He was asked by a journalist if this was the response to the Follow This resolution, and he said, no, there was a kernel of truth in there. But I hear from people within Shell, this is the first time outsiders have influence on our strategy. And before you now think, maybe you're already thinking that, what an arrogant story. He's telling us that he single-handedly changed 4 oil majors. Of course, I have to admit I started this, but a lot of people came to help me. But the real heroes of this story are the individuals with the pension funds who had the guts to vote for our resolution against the management advice. Normally you just follow the advice of the management, and I can show the Dutch pension funds who supported that. That's the next slide. So here you will see how this all starts. So it starts with just one big pension fund, and maybe you can look who's your own pension fund, who says, it's quite a fair ask, so why don't we vote for it? And next year, a couple of more vote for it, and more investors start to support it. And these are the real heroes of the story. And this still looks very abstract. You can see the billions they all represent, but I could better say the fact that Shell moved, the fact that BP, Equinor, and Total moved, is not thanks to Aegon, Achmea, and Actiam, but it's thanks to Willemijn, Hans, and a couple of other people. Because I know all these individuals who had the guts to convince their whole company that they should vote for this resolution and they should vote against the board of Shell. And these are the people who are very difficult to recognize because when you have these meetings with big pension funds, they look the same, they talk the same in these big meetings, but only in the elevator then suddenly you find out, hey, these are people who are very morally driven. These are people who really want to make a difference. And the people who talk a lot in public about want to do something about climate change, these are the ones who just still vote with management. It's also what also is a telltale if people in this world where everybody wears a tie and a suit say, yeah, but I never wear. I'm a very progressive guy. I never wear a tie, for example. You can be sure that's the only progressive thing he does. So be careful with people who wear ties. Let me finalize by showing you what happened. So these people are really the heroes. These are the people who made this all happen, because we can't wait for an epiphany of an oil major CEO. When I started Follow This, I sometimes thought This is so logical. There must be one CEO of one oil major who has a very heavy debate with one of his children, and who has a sleepless night, and the next day he wakes up and he sees a light, and he comes to his office and says, yes, we're going to change. I see that the oil and gas age is over. I'm going to invest in renewables. This is not going to happen. These people owe their position. They race to the top of these companies by being very successful in oil and gas. They don't have the imagination beyond oil and gas. But luckily enough, more and more investors say, yes, we know this has to happen. So more and more investors can see this world, and they say to the oil majors, you really have to change. And the good thing is, I said, these are morally driven people. They all want to explain to their children what they did about climate change. One of them always says, quotes his favorite philosopher and says, with great power comes great responsibility. Later he told me that's Spider-Man. But they are morally driven, but they have the financial arguments in their hands, because they can convince everybody by saying climate change is such a threat to all our assets, all our billions. We need to stop it, because it's going to affect our real estate, it's going to affect agriculture, it's going to affect the world economy, and we have to grow with the world economy. So therefore, they have the right arguments, and they convince companies. And this group is growing, and this also shows that big changes never come from majorities, but from small minorities who ask for change. And I can show you another slide of what happened in 2020 during the AGM season. Here you see the support for our resolution. So it started very small, 2.7%. Only Actiam in the Netherlands and a few other institutional investors voted for a resolution, and then it grows. And in 2020, something extraordinary happened, because all the oil majors where we had put our resolution on the agenda all said now, just before the vote, they set a new ambition. And they all said, by 2050, we will be net zero energy companies. And now, the resolution to follow this is completely unnecessary. So they move from unreasonable to unnecessary. So they said to all these shareholders quite aggressively, we have a new ambition, so you have to vote against this resolution. And guess what happens? At Shell, let me take that example, in 2017, 2018, 5.5% voted for. In 2020, 3 times as much, 14.4% voted for. So basically all these investors are telling the oil industry, nice, you have nice words about 2050, but we really want you to take action now. And so we want you to decrease emissions and make sure, nice, you have stories about 2020, but you really have to start investing differently so the emissions will go down in this decade, because we really need the emissions to go down in this decade to have any chance to reach the Paris Climate Agreement. Let me finalize by first saying, I hope I have convinced you that activist shareholders really make a difference, and I hope you all want to be part of this movement, and that you all buy a green share in Shell, Total, BP, or maybe Chevron. Also, all join this movement, all send this email to the CEOs of these companies. Dear Ben, dear Bernard, dear Patrick, please have the guts to shift your investments. Please have the guts to get into transition. With best regards from TEDx in Bussum. But that's one thing. But the most important thing, I hope that you all think back of your own. Wouldn't it be great if, and fill in your own dream and think, if an unknown journalist can change the course of oil majors, the biggest companies in the world, and again, not single-handedly, with the help of a lot of people. If he can do that, I can also start changing the world and start with my own dream. And you will be surprised if you start doing this. As soon as you're visible, how many people are going to help you? And if you don't have an idea yourself, please look around you. Maybe you see people on their own trying to change things and in want of help. So please help them too, in your company, in your city, wherever. Because I really think that minorities drive change, and I really think that stopping climate change and all other things that make the world a better place need people who are not afraid to hear that's a noble cause or that's a sympathetic initiative. So please don't listen to that and carry on. And for our part, we will carry on till big oil stops climate change. Thank you.